parents shape children's emotional and mental development. Parental actions can help a child learn to love, respect, and be independent or experience fear, obligation, and guilt. The adults we become are direct results of our childhood. So, while we must assume responsibility for our adult lives, we should not ignore the influence of childhood events. By understanding their importance, we can focus on giving our children the best experiences possible. Many issues you face today, whether at work, with your partner, or with your children, might be connected to the pain you experienced years ago. Fixing these problems requires digging for the source, often hidden within childhood. And while our traumas are unique, you are not alone in processing them. Irrespective of your childhood experiences, you can make different choices to improve your adult life. All toxic parents are different, but we can categorize them into the following groups. Inadequate parents who make their children perform adult duties. Hovering parents who control every minute of their children's lives. Alcoholic parents whose children have to clean up after them. Emotional abusers who use derogatory remarks that rob their children of self-confidence. Physical abusers who lash out at their children and make them feel guilty. Sexual abusers who traumatize their children overtly or covertly. Therapy is most effective when it proceeds down a double track, both changing current self-defeating behavior and disconnecting from the traumas of the past. Susan Forward, Ph.D. This summary aims to uncover the childhood pain that affects you now. Then, as a parent, you can choose a different parenting strategy to ensure a positive and secure upbringing for your child. Key point 2. Toxic parents fit into different categories. There are different types of toxic parents, but regardless of the type, their children struggle with damaged self-esteem and a sense of worthlessness that often leads to self-destructive behaviors and inadequacy. Godlike parents assume they must be perfect in the eyes of a child. Children with godlike parents have two cardinal thoughts. I am bad and my parents are good, and I am weak and my parents are strong. These thoughts prevent the child from acknowledging their parents are human and can make mistakes. Denying these truths erases the hurt parents caused, whether the child knowingly ignores or forgets the parents' wrongdoings. Sometimes, people rationalize the pain and discomfort by explaining and excusing those mistakes. Inadequate parents. Primary responsibilities for adequate parenting include providing for a child's physical and emotional needs and setting moral and ethical guidelines. Inadequate parents don't cater to their children's needs. Moreover, they expect the kids to take care of them instead. Controlling parents. Over-controlled children grow into dependent, fearful, and inadequate adults. They don't fully separate from their parents, who continue to heavily influence their kids' lives, disguising their control with care or concern. Such parents feel rejected when it's time for their child to gain independence. When adult children attempt to free themselves from these shackles, the parents guilt-trip them and tag them as disloyal. If that does not work, they resort to manipulation. People react to intense control from toxic parents in two ways: capitulation or rebellion, and both responses are a form of control. Alcoholic parents. These parents play the charade of the normal family, making the child hide the truth and constantly frightened to reveal it. A parent whose senses are dulled behaves irrationally, manifesting as abandoning the child's basic needs. A child of alcoholic parents usually assumes the role of a caretaker. Many of these children go on to marry alcoholics and often become alcoholics themselves. Surprisingly, many people repeat their parents' behavior patterns due to familiarity. They hope to navigate the same conflict differently to reach a better result. This reenactment is called repetitive compulsion. Key point 3. Hostile parenting can cause lifelong trauma. Verbally abusive parents harm their children openly and overtly with a hostile attitude. Physical abusers give in to their anger and indulge in destructive behavior while shifting the blame onto their kids. Verbal abuse is as damaging as physical abuse. While one leaves scars on the outside, the other leaves bruises on the inside. Verbal abusers. Verbal abuse can appear in two ways: overt name-calling, abuse hidden behind jokes. Humor can foster family bonding as long as it does not belittle other family members. Children have an innate need for their parents' approval. They internalize whatever their parents say about them. Sometimes people conceal abuse behind a mask of care or advice. In this case, children overlook the adverse effects because they can't see through the veil. Healthy parents are happy for their kids' growth, but others will compete with their children. They pretend to want the best for them, but they just want to feel more successful than their children. The impossible expectation of perfection from children can lead to verbal abuse from parents. Because they are high achievers themselves, parents often demand perfection from their children, who may have talent in areas different from their parents. Excessive focus on perfectionism can result in one of two scenarios. Children may spend all their adult lives trying to win the love and approval of their parents. Children might follow a path of rebellion to develop an aversion to success. Physical abusers. These types of parents let out their anger on their children and cannot exercise control over their impulses. Such parents usually come from families that have tolerated violence. So, they pass on the vicious tradition to the next generation. Despite research showing that physical punishment does not help with the reprimand of a child, parents who faced physical abuse as children continue to use it to affect behavioral change. Many studies show that hitting children can prevent them from unwanted actions temporarily while causing anger, self-hatred, and violent thoughts toward the abuser. Such feelings can lead to long-term issues in the child's relationships, work, and mental health. Key point 4. Sexually abusive parents destroy the very heart of childhood. Incest is perhaps the cruelest of human experiences. The legal definition of incest is sexual intercourse between blood relatives that extends to all sexual overtures or contact with the genitalia or other body parts. It also includes non-physical contact, such as asking for sexually suggestive photographs. Psychological incest involves invading the child's sense of privacy with acts such as spying or seductive comments. All these behaviors are kept secret. The aggressor can be any family member. Children are often coerced psychologically with threats of bodily harm, public humiliation, or abandonment. Some abusers harm their victims physically into submission. Victims of incest remain silent for fear of getting hurt and breaking up the family. Many stay silent, fearing that people will think their awful experience is a lie. Keeping this trauma secret affects their lives and forces them to seclude themselves. They feel bad, dirty, damaged, ashamed, and often internalize blame. Incest victims cope with trauma by blocking out the memories of abuse from their conscious minds. Some events can suddenly remind people of their traumatic memories. Adult victims of incest have difficulty with romantic relationships and feel disgusted at the thought of sex. While some may lose themselves in the haze of alcohol and drug abuse, others allow themselves to become overweight to avoid people who interest them. They also may believe they have power when they don't. Adults who have suffered sexual abuse need to seek help from professionals. A therapist-led support group might also help to tackle the problem. Talking to people who went through the same hardship alleviates loneliness and promotes connection. Denial is the lid on our emotional pressure cooker. The longer we leave it on, the more pressure we build up. Susan Forward, Ph.D. Did you know? A study by the U.S. Department of Human Services and other research proves that at least 10% of children under 18 experience sexual abuse by a family member they trust. Key point 5. You can reclaim your life from your toxic parents. Now we can move on to alleviating the toxic influence parents continue to have on your life. Remember, you can change and shape your future toward a positive outcome. It doesn't have to be how it's always been. Contrary to popular belief, forgiving the ones who hurt you doesn't necessarily relieve your pain. Often, people don't feel better after forgiving. They still feel bad about themselves, and their symptoms persist. Pardoning their parents doesn't create significant or lasting changes. Rushed forgiveness prevents you from dealing with your feelings about the issue. Forgiving your parents can cause bottled-up anger since you think you cannot feel irate. Therefore, a pardon should come after you've processed your emotions, when it can relieve vengeful thoughts. Letting go doesn't mean ignoring the abuse you faced, but recognizing its effects. The only way to feel release from the anger built up over the years is to work through it, which means that you put the responsibility on your parents' shoulders where it belongs. To be self-defined is to feel free to have your own beliefs, feelings, and behaviors separate from those of your parents or others, which many children of toxic parents often find challenging. But once you realize you can break free and be independent, you start seeing the world excitedly. No one can be self-defining all the time. Our interactions with others call for a non-mechanical exchange of emotions. A compulsive reaction doesn't let you listen, reflect, and weigh the consequences of your actions. Reactivity takes away your control over your feelings, so you become susceptible to getting hurt. When your emotions and rational thinking work together, you can move from an impulsive reaction to an informed response. Choosing responsiveness instead of reacting enables you to preserve your worth, despite what people say about you. You can become responsive in two ways. The first is moving away from being defensive during the conflict. You lose power when trying to persuade someone, but you can retain control by using non-defensive responses, such as, "Oh, I see. That's interesting." Secondly, proclaiming your stance on the issue helps prevent an impulsive reaction and lets you define yourself. Position statements are declarations of your beliefs and what can change your mind about those beliefs. Key point 6. Stop assuming responsibility for the abuse you experienced as a child. Often, adults take the blame for the abuse they suffered as children. They may feel reluctant to assign responsibility to their parents who were inadequate, ill, or appeared to have good intentions. But the intent is irrelevant. It's the result that counts. There are different ways to bury these negative emotions. Some struggle with sickness or depression, while others drown them in food, alcohol, drugs, or sex. Some have difficulty controlling their anger, which leads to frustration, trust issues, and stress. All these are ineffective methods of dealing with anger and will not set you free from parental control. There are healthy ways to express your anger without violating your values or betraying yourself. Here are some ideas. Do not judge your feelings when angry. Let out the anger on a pillow or a photograph, or talk to someone you trust. Avoid verbal abuse at all costs. Engage in physical activities that release tension from your body. Increase your physical activity. Do not describe yourself as a bad person because you are angry. Let your anger teach you about yourself. Identifying what you missed in your childhood is essential to grieve appropriately. Childhood loss can include loss of trust, joy, innocence, love, and safety. If your parents were toxic, you've most likely ignored these losses. Overlooking them does not prevent them from taking a toll on your sense of self-worth. Stop trying to avoid the pain and work through it to heal. Grief is a difficult process, but we must go through it. Working through grief does not mean your life has to halt. You can still carry out your daily duties. Do things you love to ensure your anger and grief do not make you bitter. Talk to the people who are important to you and share how you feel. Avoiding grief prevents you from enjoying truly good moments. When grieving, you may experience a range of emotions such as shock, rage, sadness, and sometimes disbelief. Free the child within you from taking on the responsibilities meant for the adult version of you. Key point 7. Confronting your toxic parents is the first step to your independence. The process of confrontation involves calmly articulating the negative experiences from your childhood to your parents and how those experiences affected you. But before taking this step, please ensure you check the following boxes with the requirements to confront your parents. Have the emotional strength required to handle denial, anger, blame, or the adverse outcomes that may arise. Have an effective support system for the entire exercise. Prepare your responses for any number of possible outcomes from the confrontation. Release yourself from bad feelings that emanate from your negative childhood experiences. You can write to your parents if you don't feel capable of confronting them face to face. Writing allows you to stay organized and in control of your thoughts. It also allows your parents to process the content and respond more meaningfully without allowing emotions to get in the way. Your letter should reflect the following thoughts: what they did to you, how you felt about it, how it affected your life, what you want them to do now. Where this confrontation happens is less important than how it happens. Toxic parents are likely to deny or attack you for being ungrateful. Be prepared to respond, not react, to whatever they say or do. Some parents avoid confrontation at all costs. Therefore, it is also essential to know when confrontation is impossible. Some confrontations are quiet, and others are explosive, but they are guaranteed to change your relationship forever. Stand your ground during a confrontation, irrespective of how your parents react. After the confrontation, you should choose the path your relationship will take. Suppose your parents show compassion and want to discuss your feelings further. In that case, you'll likely have a healthier relationship once you work through your issues. However, if they don't want to mend your relationship and change how you interact, you can keep in touch on different terms, so less is expected from both sides. Alternatively, you don't have to stay in contact with your parents if that is the best option for your well-being and mental health. Conclusion. It's important to remember that nobody will change unless they want to. So, let go of the struggle to make toxic parents change and the childhood fantasy that they will one day see how wonderful you are and give you all their love. Allow your parents to be who they want to be and focus on building yourself from the ground up. The key is to be a better person, free of childhood toxins. Once you stop trying to change the past, you will no longer sabotage your happiness. It is also vital to redefine love. Being raised by toxic parents often gives you a lopsided view of what loving means and how it feels. True love does not have any negative emotion associated with it and creates freedom and responsibility. Focus on seeing the positive side of love and nurture your relationship with yourself first and foremost. Once you love yourself, you'll be capable of loving and receiving love from others. Sincere love gives you peace, warmth, and safety. Such love makes you realize your parents didn't know how to express love healthily. Acknowledging their limitations will help you open your heart to the healing love you deserve and strengthen existing relationships. Try this. Be more emotionally available in your relationships. Vulnerability is essential for deep connections and effective communication. Determine how to break the toxicity cycle. You can list those you have hurt and apologize to them. Lastly, don't shy away from therapy if you need professional help.